president-elect of the Society for Professional Journalists, William Walsh. Applause. Next we have Nick. I can never pronounce his last name properly. Roble. I was close. He's the head of development at Pixel. Find him on Twitter at Pixel. And then finally, me, moderator, Gary Jones. I'm the founder and president of the Undocumented Society. And I'm honored to be this panel today. And if that was any very good questions, don't waste too much time. So the first question is going to be for Lynn. Let's start with, why is it commonplace and acceptable for media to paint a sensationalistic and oftentimes one-sided
narrative of women in peril when on the internet, when oftentimes it's actually men that face the majority of harassment online?
So I will start by saying I don't think it is acceptable, and I don't know that practicing journalists that are trying to cover something ethically and being responsible would say that is acceptable. I do not know if more men or more women are harassed online. I actually am not sure what that is as far as the percentages. What I will say is, in any newsroom. So if you're in a newsroom and there's normally a morning meeting or something of that sort, an editorial meeting, and you're thinking of stories, okay? And someone pitches a story idea. If you are in a TV newsroom, you're looking at, okay, what are my elements for TV? What am I going to show visually? Who's going to talk to me? So if you have a story pitch, let's say, about a man who has been harassed online, you have to think, okay, is this person going to talk to me? That's kind of the first kind of question normally that's asked. If they're not, then it's harder to do that story. If they want to remain anonymous, it's harder to do that story. So I think when you're looking at it, I don't think news is like, oh my gosh, yes, a news reporter is like, I want to cover this woman in peril. I would say that's not happening, and that's not the case. Mm-hmm. What you could see maybe happening is, are there more women stepping forward? If that's the case, and there are more women that are willing to talk on the record about it, then that's who the media may talk to because they're willing to talk. That said, should the media try to see if it's happening to men? I think they should. But if men are unwilling to talk, or that if males do not want to share that, that's harder for the media to go in and tell that story.
Okay. Just going to go straight into the next question here. This one would be for Nick. The question is, what has changed in the last, say, 5 years, maybe to a decade, within the gaming community and the industry that has allowed the latest controversies? A good example might be something like Gamergate. What has allowed these controversies to sort of come to a boiling point?
Well, I don't think anything's changed in the industry at all. The only thing that's really changed is the coverage of the industry, and that story gets more page views than talking about developers, talking about games. If you try to think of controversial things, whether people agree with you or not, they're going to look at it more. They're going to comment on it more. You want their eyeballs if you're in online media versus being an online journalist.
I was talking with a few people on Twitter, and some mentioned something like change in technology may have facilitated the sort of shift within the community and the industry and what's allowed.
Well, it's made sensationalistic blogging. I don't even want to call it writing or journalism. It's made sensationalistic blogging easier to find, easier to distribute. There's easy ways to game the system on search results that a lot of these outlets use. Other than that, I don't really know much has changed. There's always been yellow journalism. There's always been yellow writing. There's always been sensationalistic writing. That's nothing new. I think the new thing is that, and probably the last 5 to 10 years, that's become very lucrative compared to how it was previously, when it was harder to distribute that stuff, you would typically find it at the aisle in your supermarket talking about Bat Boy, right? It's that level of reporting. Now it's so easy, and it's so easy to make money, and so many of the people that are writing for these sites that consider themselves journalists or journalistic outlets, they're not journalists. They don't have a degree in journalism. They have a degree in something else completely unrelated, creative writing, maybe, right? So they want their writing to be creative, not accurate.
Gotcha.
And if I can jump in there,
Please.
I agree. I think that's kind of what we're seeing, right? It's easier for someone to publish online than it was 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago. So with more people, with it being easier, more people are doing it. And I think that's sort of, as being a part and being asked to speak about the ethics of in the gaming journalism world specifically, but also how journalists have covered Gamergate or gamers, that I've learned, and that's the biggest takeaway, is that, a tweet, no matter who is publishing it, you could be a journalist, it could be my mom sitting at home, it has potential to have the same impact as an article in the Washington Post, in the New York Times. So because of that, people have to understand the implications that come from publishing online and how that could harm, how that could help people. I mean, it's a big responsibility. So I hope people, as they're publishing online, they're realizing this. Unfortunately, I don't think it's happening as often as it should. And instead, they're just freely publishing, which they have a right to do. You have a right to share what you think online. But you should, and I hope, want to do it responsibly, whether you're mainstream media, a blogger, or just someone tweeting about your life.
And a lot of times what you see sort of these hobbyists become bloggers and oftentimes call themselves journalists, and they publish articles that are very deeply rooted in ideology. So Lynn, I wanted to get your take. What is your opinion on rating a story or a book or any piece of media, like a video game, for example, since we're talking about video games? What is your opinion of rating a video game or any piece of media using your ideology as sort of your basis for your arguments?
So, and I think you're specifically referring to, let's say, if a video game maybe is associated with like a certain religion and giving it a low mark because of that, or...
To sort of give it a good example, the way that an organization like Feminist Frequency looks at video games, and what is your opinion of rating a video game using your ideology as a benchmark?
Well, so I think you're looking at a couple things there, right? If you are giving a review or rating a game, that tends to be an opinion. That's your opinion. That's the opinion of maybe the magazine, the group you're with. That's the opinion of you yourself as a game reviewer in this case. In that case, I think it always has to be clearly stated that this is your opinion. I also think, and I don't rate video games, I don't rate products, but I also think any kind of being transparent about any connection you may have to the game or the product that you're reviewing, I know I would want my readers and viewers to know about, and I think that should be disclosed or at least mentioned so that the readers know that and can make up their own mind. As far as your own ideology, I would say, let's say you're Christian and you're rating a game a certain way because it is associated with Christianity, I would hope that you would put that bias aside. That, to me, in order to be a good reviewer or to rate games in a sort of non-biased way, you would put that aside, right? I mean, journalists do that every day in the newsroom. We all have different things that we're involved in. We might have different passion projects, if you will, different volunteer things we do, but at the end of the day, when we're covering a story, we have to kind of leave that aside and only focus on the facts. So I would hope that people were not doing that. I think it does a disservice to people who are reading the reviews. If I'm a gamer and I'm reading it and it's getting a low review because of that association with a certain religion, I don't think it's not servicing the readers and the viewers as well as you could be.
And especially over the past few years, a lot of articles have taken a very biased approach to their reporting and to their reviewing. So, and this has sort of created a distrust amongst gamers of the gaming media. So I actually wanted to direct this next question at Nick. What do you think can be done to repair the relationship between the gaming media and the gaming community?
I don't even know. No, I think it's already repairing itself, because the gaming community is finding people that are more trustworthy, and they're going over to Twitch, and they're going over to YouTube, and they're going over to other streaming services where you can see the game right there. You know, you can listen to the person talk about it while they're playing it. You're not, if you feel that what they're saying is affecting what you're seeing on the screen while they're streaming it, you can just mute it and watch it and decide if that's what you like. I mean, I hit a point where there's very, very few text review sites that I read anymore for games. I'll just go see what the community thinks on YouTube or Twitch, and that feels much more honest, is because chances are they've already paid for the product because they were interested in it to begin with. Mm-hmm. So they're going to give it a very, very honest review, because if they don't like it, they just wasted $60. You know, games are expensive. I'm more likely to trust those people at this point than people that write for most of the major gaming sites. Not all of them. I mean, there's still some that are good, and I don't even want to mention any specific outlets. But yeah. I mean, it'll solve itself, and it'll do it with the participation of the gaming media or without it. If they want to stay as gaming media, you need an audience, and if you lose your audience, you're done. So we'll see what happens there in the next couple of years. But I see, just in the last year or so, it's really shifting towards more, honestly, just amateur. Yeah, amateur, alternative, whatever you want to call it. People that are interested in the subject that they're talking about, so they want to give an honest opinion on it, not necessarily an opinion based on just how they feel about this one little thing and, you know, maybe one game or something like that. So it'll solve itself, you know.
Right. And to sort of continue on that same train of thought, there's also been a lot of talk of collusion between the media and the industry, you know, with large corporations and publishers like EA and BioWare. Yeah. What do you think can be done to repair the relationship between the community and the industry?
I would actually say that should be gaming media's job to help with that. You know, big companies, whether it's gaming or anything else, and for anyone who doesn't know, my background's all marketing and advertising. I'm not just an indie dev guy. I've been doing advertising for like 17 years. They're always going to push, especially if they're advertising on your platform, whether that's a magazine or a TV show or a website. And it is the journalist's job, and it is the job of the people who own that business that the gaming media is getting published on to push back, say, you know, we're taking your money for advertising so you can tell people about your product, but we're not necessarily going to give you a good review just for doing that. You know, that is the way it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely. In newsrooms, you know, even in like my newsroom, the advertisers are on a different floor than us. I mean, it's that separate, and it really has to be, because you wouldn't want that influence to taint a reporter's perspective when they go out and do any kind of story, good or bad, on anyone, or, you know, just finding facts. You don't want them to think, oh my gosh, they spend however much money, you know, that helps me in reality keep their job. So that separation is very, very important.
Yeah, and it's not just an issue in games. I mean, film too, you know, the larger magazines that report on film, that advertise the same films that they're writing about. Sometimes you can tell when the reviews are a little bit skewed and that kind of thing. And it is entertainment media, so we're not talking about saving the world here. But it would be nice if they tried a little bit harder to pretend that they actually care what they're writing about, and it's not really just to generate ad revenue or to give their friend's game a good review or anything like that.
Let's see. This next question is actually a bit long. This one came from Reddit, so I'm just going to read it verbatim, and it's a bit of a firecracker. And this is for Lynn.
From Reddit, huh? All right.
All right. Shireen Mitchell, in her panel, stated that having the SavePoint panel is putting my harassers on stage, calling out you directly as a harasser. This echoes numerous articles in many different news outlets leading up to this event, calling you as a member of this panel anything from a harasser of women, misogynist, an online terrorist, perpetrator of cyber violence, etc. Yet you and the SPJ have said nothing about this, as far as they assume. Mm-hmm. But when the SPJ is mentioned in the Gawker versus Hogan case, there was an immediate response from your organization. Why have you and the SPJ have been completely silent in these cases of the media slandering you and your organization?
So I would say, first, I am not a harasser. I don't consider myself that. I think people who know me know that. And I don't think my work shows that I am. So to me, when things were being said like that about me, which I wasn't even aware of actually, because it was happening, I think, on Reddit and other places, and as people were bringing that to my attention, I did think about, do I say something? I mean, and being very honest, I did think, do I address this? And if so, how? So personally, I first thought about that. Then I thought, does SPJ, because of my role with SPJ, need to address this, need to talk about this? I decided that no, I didn't feel it was necessary, because to me, the claim was so just out of left field. It does not characterize or represent who I am, that by engaging in it or even addressing it, to me, just seems silly. And I'll be very honest, I personally didn't feel the need to address any of that. As far as SPJ, I also didn't think that it was SPJ's job to address that either, for the same reasons. We are not a group that harasses anyone. We are trying to train journalists and trying to talk about journalism ethics. When you bring up the Gawker versus Hogan, the court case that's going on right now, and for those of you that are unaware, during one of the, I think it was maybe a cross-examination, or it was something in the courtroom, they brought in a big poster of the SPJ Code of Ethics. So the SPJ Code of Ethics is one of the most widely used codes of ethics for journalists. The important thing about it, though, is it's not something that is a legal document. It's not legally binding, and it does not license anyone. So attorneys are licensed by a state bar. Journalists are not licensed by SPJ and can lose their license. So why they did say something, and why the president of SPJ and the ethics chair did speak very quickly about that, is they were trying to use it in a courtroom for something that it wasn't. And for us, that sets a precedent that could get a lot of people and could get free speech in trouble. That's how we see it. If you start saying, or if our code of ethics is allowed in a courtroom to represent what someone can and cannot do, we feel that threatens the public's right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And that's what we were afraid of, that we wanted to make it very clear. That is not what it is there for. It is there as guidelines, it is there as an education tool, and it is there to try to make sure that people are reporting and being journalists responsibly.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. This one's going to be for Nick. So over the past, I think, 3 years or so, certain actors who shall not be named have kind of entered into the industry, and they've been a part of the community for a long time, but they've entered into the industry, and they've done things that have left very deep wounds in our community. How do you think that we begin to heal and to move forward from the wounds that have been left by these certain actors?
That was really vague. I don't even know how to answer that. I mean,
to clarify,
wounds will heal on their own, and if there are people that keep reopening them, they just won't be welcome anymore. I don't think any one person can really solve that. I know I can't solve that. It's when you get down to it, it's internet drama, right? It's not real life.
Right.
People that think the internet's real life need to get outside more, and realize that it's really not real life. And I know that sounds super dismissive, and I completely intend for it to sound dismissive, because it's so ridiculous that these actors have been able to drive these wedges between people who otherwise would probably get along and agree on most things, but because one person may be friend with them and then another person's not friends with them, you end up butting heads with people that you should be hanging out with and like talking about games with. And we're at South by Southwest, we should be getting beers together. It's all silly to me.
And I guess to clarify the question, conversations within our community just can't seem to happen anymore. Anytime you bring up any topic, it almost always devolves into gender politics or identity politics or race politics. I worded it a little vaguely, but I wanted to ask kind of how do we come back together?
Yeah. Well, I'm like the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy, right? So my opinion immediately, if we're going that direction, is kind of irrelevant. But at the same time, it's funny that like Lynn was called, I've been called all these terrible names and all these terrible things said about me, racist, misogynistic, yada, yada, yada. What? Like, look who I'm sitting next to right here. How is this even an issue? Why? How did anyone ever come to believe something so ridiculous? And then whisper down the lane online. You know, the Twitiots, you know, the people on Twitter that think that's real life, and think that the best way to have a discussion with someone is to say awful things about them. Hopefully people will learn to just kind of start ignoring them, and then we can all get together and talk about stuff again.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, this has been, as I put it once, this has
It's
been
a slow process, yeah.
This
People
has been the
are
largest flame
stubborn.
war in history. The next question is going to be for Lynn. Do you think that the controversy, like Gamergate, do you think it's a natural consequence of clickbait journalism entering into the gaming sphere?
So it's funny, when I think of clickbait journalism, and even, you know, when I've heard it joked about in newsrooms, I think of like pictures of this baby otter, or it's, you know, listicles, and, you know, to us, that's kind of like clickbait journalism. I can understand why it could, like, the articles about Gamergate and harassment could be lumped into that, because of how many people are paying attention and how many people are clicking about it. And it talks about harassment, which tends to be something people are like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So I can understand why it might be looped into that. I would say if anyone is covering, like an example, if someone pitched, I want to do a story on this Gamergate issue. To me, it is a very complicated issue that has all sorts of different sides, and it would not be something that could be responsibly covered in a clickbait article, if you will. You can cover pictures of a baby otter being born in a clickbait form, if you will. You have a couple pictures, you have their name, how much the otter weighs, where it was born, you're kind of done. Gamergate, from even following it for the year and a little more than a year that I have been, it cannot be covered that way responsibly. I do not think so. So as far as why did maybe, I guess, mainstream media organizations jump on it and cover it, I think it's because people were talking about it. People were probably contacting some of these reporters and saying, hey, here's this story. Was the reporting always responsible? I think there could be a good argument to say that it was not. I think it also could be a good argument that someone could make that there could have been more digging done on those articles to make them just more complete.
Well, this ties in something that we were talking about earlier, how we see the panels that were earlier this week, the harassment panels, lots and lots and lots and lots of news coverage. No one's even tried to contact us about this
That's
at
true.
all.
Yes.
Not even small little publications. Everyone wants to stay very, very, very far away from it because there is a narrative, and it is not one that's in our favor. So they don't really care what we have to say about it. It's kind of what it feels like to me.
Mm-hmm. And so we were talking about that, and I was asking Nick if anyone had contacted him for any of, you know, any articles that had been written. I haven't seen an article with your name specifically mentioned, so that, you know, that to me, like if you're not mentioning their name or specifically mentioning the panel, maybe you wouldn't contact us, which is reasonable.
So when say, I will name a publication because I can't help myself. So when an article like when a publication like Recode puts my name in an article and says I'm part of a hate group because I'm on this panel, they probably should have reached out to me, right? Would that be fair to say? Okay.
Absolutely, yes. But it goes to the point, right, that's why to me, Gamergate would not be something that would be like clickbait, which is normally like kind of a quick hit, easy story to get online. It's just not. And I think anyone, you know, any responsible journalist would look at the issues and be like, whoa, wait a second. This is going to take a long time, and we need to talk to all these different players. It is, you know, if you look at the code of ethics and just how, you know, ethical journalists practice, if you're naming someone, you reach out to them. Even if you have a statement, I mean, you give them the opportunity. This happens all the time when we cover news, you know, when we report and produce stories. Even if the police department spokesperson says we're not talking to you, if we're naming an officer, you know, an officer specifically, we're going to do everything we can to reach out to that individual. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time, and I think that's a failure in journalism. Journalists need to be better at that. Bloggers need to be better at that and realize that, though, too. I mean, that goes back to there are more people practicing journalism. They may not believe that they are, but you're publishing online, you're writing online. It can impact people's lives. We need to start learning what it means to be a responsible journalist.
So the next one's going to be a two-part question, and this is for Nick. I'm going to ask it in two parts, and have you answer the first part first and ask the second part afterwards. The first part is, what makes the gaming industry so unique? How is it any different from the film industry?
No, it's not. It's exactly the same thing. It's just an entertainment industry. It's a bigger entertainment industry than film. I mean, it's the biggest worldwide entertainment industry to ever exist. Ever, right? So you get lots of different opinions from lots of different kinds of people, which is great. That's part of the reason it's so big. There's products that will appeal to basically every kind of person at this point. So I don't know that it's really that different at all.
Okay. And then the second part of the question is, since you said they're not so different after all, do you think that there are any factors that may be keeping certain people out of the industry, like women or minorities, and or the community, and which is an inversion of just a few years ago, where we could all just talk together, have a few beers, and play Super Smash Brothers, so long as I got a Wii Fit trainer.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm doing indie dev stuff, so I can't really talk too much about AAA. But it doesn't hurt to look at some of the bigger titles that have been coming out. Tomb Raider series, for example. Brianna Pratchett. She's been in the game industry for who knows how long at this point. I don't think there's anything keeping anyone out who wants to get in, other than. Well, not even other than. There's nothing keeping anyone out. If you can do the job, people will hire you, and diversity of opinion and race and gender and all that kind of stuff. Having that in the industry is only going to make the product stronger. Again, like from a marketing, advertising point of view, because I'm not a AAA guy. Why would anyone not want other people in the game industry? I mean, it's a stupid suggestion. As far as I'm concerned. And in terms of the community, maybe it's a little bit different for me because I'm based out of New York, and I mean, every kind of person you could possibly imagine goes to the gaming events in New York, whether it's the meetup or play testing events or the various classes that different groups do up there to teach people game development. I mean, crazy diverse, because New York is a crazy diverse city. Now somewhere else, maybe in the Midwest where like it's mostly white, obviously you're not going to see that, right? But that's not due to any kind of racism or gender issues or sexism like that. Just, if you want to learn how to make games and you want to play games, and just do it. Nobody cares, really. Yeah, that's it. I don't know.
And then I actually want Lynn to sort of extend on this one. Do you think that media, the gaming media specifically, is creating an atmosphere of fear for certain types of people who may be looking to get into the industry or looking to get into the community?
I'm going to say I don't know, just because I don't follow all of the gaming blogs as closely as others who may have that insight. I would hope the answer is no. I would hope that isn't happening. If some people believe that it is, I think the best thing to do is, if you have a difference of opinion, let's say, that you feel like is not being represented in gaming blogs, reach out to those reporters, see if they'd be willing to talk to you, see if they'd be willing, do a pitch. I mean, that's how we get stories. I mean, people contact us. I mean, that's constantly what's happening. I get texts, I get phone calls, we get emails. Do your pitch for a possible story. If you feel as if your view or a group of people's views are not being represented, or that they missed the other side of a story, share it with those reporters. That could be one way to reach out to them. I think the key is when you're doing that, don't yell at them, don't call them names, do it respectfully. They're going to then look at you as a professional and someone that they can talk to that could get them their next story. Because at the end of the day, they always need their next story. I mean, we always need something kind of for the next day.
Okay. This next question was originally intended for our other panelist who couldn't be with us today. So I'm actually going to defer to Nick for this one. Lately, we've seen a large shift with large platforms like Twitter and Facebook, who shifted long ago. But we've seen a large shift towards sort of protecting people's emotional safety and well-being online. And some may call it censorship, others would disagree. There's a discussion to be had on that front, certainly. But do you believe that it's important to protect the mental and emotional well-being of people on a platform? And I want you to step back and imagine that this is your platform. You created some new platform called, I don't know, Twoter, to avoid copyright. And you've got to protect these people. Is it important?
Should we worry about people being bothered by words on a screen? Is that basically the root of the question?
Yes.
Words or video or audio, whatever.
But
sticks and stones.
And I prefaced it that way to kind of get you to kind of step back and put yourself in like the CEO of Twitter's shoes.
Yeah, it's nobody's responsibility to protect anyone else's feelings at all. I mean, that doesn't mean you should go out of the way to be a jerk to people, but if you say something that you don't intend to offend anyone with and someone absolutely freaks out and starts calling you all of these names, my reaction, having been in that scenario, is grow up. You know, you're saying you don't like the words I just said, and so you came back at me and said much more vicious things, and I'm supposed to apologize? Grow up. If you had said, you know, oh, I didn't like why you said this thing that you said, and tell me why, which I know is hard to do in 140 characters on Twitter.
Twitter.
That is, you know, that's a very different story. If you want someone to understand why you're upset about something, you need to explain to them why you're upset. You can't just say, I'm upset, and you need to listen to me. Because what you think doesn't matter because what you said upset me. No, that's just not the way the world works. And I fear for a future in where the emotional instability of others would force us to censor our own words in that way. Censor is it's not really censor. To force us to, I'll just go with censor. Censor our words in that way. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
And sorry to stick with you so long, Nick, but I have another question to kind of extend on these points you've been making. Do you think it's the responsibility of the platform maker,
No,
like say,
of course
Twitter,
not.
to let me finish. Do you think it's the responsibility of the platform makers to create tools to allow users to protect themselves? To give an example.
I don't think they're responsible to do that. I mean, they can if they want to. You know, that's the platform maker's call. Twitter has block and mute and all that stuff. So just all that functionality that you're talking about is already there. But again, I would question if someone is on social media, if they don't want people to respond to what they're saying, why are they on social media?
Personally, putting myself in the shoes of like the CEO of Twitter, and I would see it as especially with the way that they seem to be running their business and how they're running it marketable to more
Corporations like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and Microsoft and Sony, and they want them to advertise on their platform. They've got to make it a place where these companies feel that they can reach their audience safely. I don't like to use the word safely very often when referring to online spaces, but they want to make sure that they're reaching their audiences and that audiences aren't running away from the platform. So if I had a platform that I were developing, I would create tools for users to protect themselves. I mean, one tool that I've suggested to Twitter is some sort of quiet mode. Imagine you say something on their platform, and the next thing you know, your mentions are on fire. It'd be nice to just be able to silence your mentions for a little bit, maybe have some sort of quiet mode where it's just you and people that you follow and who follow you. Something like that might be nice. Create tools that allow you to sort of put up your own walls rather than having the platform put up walls for you. But moving to the next question, which is for Lynn, also very long, also from Reddit.
Also from Reddit, that's what I was going to say.
So I'm just going to read it word for word. One of the things that Gamergate uncovered was cronyism in the indie game scene, with journalists giving undisclosed coverage to games made by their developer friends. This likely means games made by other developers are given less of a chance. What can gamers, developers, and game journalists do to counteract that and give these non-connected developers games a fair chance at getting coverage?
Yeah, so I think, at first, if you do have a connection, from a journalist ethics perspective, if you have a connection to anyone involved with the issue you're covering, the organization you're covering, in this case, the developer of the game, and you're reviewing it, that should be disclosed. I think you should disclose that. You should be very transparent about it. To go a step further, in most cases, if we have that kind of situation come up in a newsroom, we will put another reporter on the story. Let's say if it was me as a news manager who has a conflict, I would not edit or oversee that story. I would not produce that story. Someone else would look over that if that conflict existed. So that's kind of very clear, transparent. You also be transparent about the connection. As far as, okay, if this is happening, which it sounds like in some cases it was happening and potentially maybe still is, how do the games that are not getting a chance, or developers who aren't getting a chance, break in? That's hard, unfortunately. It is hard. I think the best thing that people can do, just the public or gamers, is you can ask questions to see if people are connected, and if they are, ask publications to be transparent. You can only choose to support publications and, game bloggers and reviewers that are transparent and that do abide by that. For those that want to get coverage, the best way is to keep pitching stuff, unfortunately. Network, that's kind of sort of the basic stuff, and sometimes it's a tough road. It's an uphill battle. Unfortunately, it's never going to be an even playing field. You even look at film reviews. It's just not an even playing field. There are people who are more well connected than someone that's starting out. That's kind of a commonplace thing that happens no matter what industry you're in. You have to work up to that level. But I think the community can choose. I'm only going to support someone who's transparent. I'm only going to support people who are being non-biased in their coverage. And hopefully that kind of follows and the big players begin to be transparent, or they become not as popular and some of the smaller bloggers do become popular.
Okay. This next one's from Nick, also from Reddit, also very long, so bear with me. A lot of controversy these past few years. There's been a lot of controversy these past few years about perceived problems in the gaming community. Regardless of what the problems may be, it seems any discussion of these issues will eventually be politicized and turn into a flame war. What can be done to alleviate some of these problems that are being perceived?
Nothing. That's just the way it is online. That's the way it's always been online. It's completely anonymous most of the time. The only thing you have to affect people with is your opinion. And so people tend to maybe be a little overzealous in the stating of their opinion. It's never going to change. That's just human nature.
Okay. I'm going to direct this next one at you as well. I feel like I'm picking on you. I'm trying not to, I promise.
Oh, I'm used to it. No, it's fine.
It's because he's a white guy, that's all it is. Now, my brain just went blank. Do you feel as though there has been a massive shift in the community as far as ideologies are concerned? Right now it seems like we're all bitterly divided along a very clear party line, Do you feel like there's been a shift in the past year as far as what people are believing? Do you believe that people are leaking from one side to the other and kind of defecting and changing their stances on certain issues?
I don't know. There's a lot more diversity of opinion online than one side or the other. So I don't know that it's that simple, really. I think most of the problems have been caused by a few bad actors as opposed to a large shift in the general community. Because again, the worldwide community, all kinds of people. I would like to see a shift away from listening to the bad actors who only contribute negativity to the community through the guise of talking about important issues. I should rephrase that, hiding behind important issues, so that anyone who disagrees with them must disagree with them on all these important issues. Well, of course, that's never the case. Well, most of the time it's not the case. Hopefully we see a shift away from, I know you don't like it, but the clickbait in terms of the games coverage. That would be a positive step, I think.
Okay, this next one's going to be for Lynn. We haven't actually touched on the 3 points that we set out. Well, we've touched on them in sort of subtopics, but we haven't actually answered the 3 major questions of this panel. One of which was, what is the importance of journalistic integrity with respect to the video game journalism?
I mean, I think anytime you're writing online, you're publishing online, no matter what it's about. But specifically, I think right now it seems like gaming, when it's covering gaming, it definitely kind of, people need to think about this. You have to be ethical. You have to publish accurately, fairly, and ethically. I think it's very, very important. But I think it's not just gaming. I mean, this is happening, you know, when you talk about sort of these online movements that are happening, you're seeing this more and more when there isn't, just an example, an easy example, the Black Lives Matter. There isn't one person that represents that, like Black Lives Matter. There are lots of people who are in this movement, and there isn't one person speaking for it. So I think when that happens, you have to be even more careful, because you want to make sure that when you are going out to talk to someone who says they're a part of this movement, well, are they representative of the movement? You can't also take what one person says as what the movement believes, right? I mean, you have to see what everyone involved, and what everyone involved feels, what their thoughts are on it, in the best way that you can.
To kind of extend from that, I want to move to Nick. Do you feel that was a critical flaw of the Gamergate movement that spawned several years back, being sort of leaderless and being almost formless, and the fact that almost anyone could participate as long as they were using the hashtag Gamergate? Do you feel that was a critical flaw of the movement?
No. I think that's what helped it spread as far as it did. And on the flip side of that, I think that's also the excuse that a lot of people writing about it use. Oh, it's so complicated. You can't talk to all these different people, work, and that's why it became this very one-sided, not even discussion, just one-sided shit-flinging, from the games media. It really would not have been hard to spend a week, a couple hours a day on Twitter or Reddit or wherever to get an idea of the general consensus, right? So it's so many different kinds of people that, of course, there's going to be differing opinions, but the root of where it all started, however much games media like to pretend that it wasn't, is just how unethical their coverage was of some games. How they just outright attacked their audience when they got called on it. That's the root of it right there. It's if you're writing articles titled "Gamers are over, gamers don't need to be your audience," and you're a game journalist, you are in the wrong business. And that's your own fault, and that's not the fault of your community. But it is a great way to lose your community. Mm-hmm. And they will find other smaller sites. They will find bloggers that are writing about it that can separate their personal opinion from their opinion as someone who enjoys playing games, any kind of game enthusiast. It's not been a lot of fun the last couple of years, really. It's been kind of tough to be on what people think is the bad side, knowing that you're not a bad person, and that the people who are calling you a bad person are people that you probably agree with on most things, and they just felt the need to maybe defend their friends a little more overzealously than was appropriate or ethical.
Okay. I should have mentioned this earlier on in the panel, but on the back of your programs, if you did receive one, there's a spot to write questions, because we've got about 9 minutes left. So I'd like to actually move to the floor to allow for questions. And we've got our first question already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hi. My name is Gary. I'm the founder, or co-founder, chief psychologist of a startup called CoupleWise.com. And I'll get to the social justice relevance for it in a minute, but it's the first proven app that really helps couples stay together. So Match.com helps millions of couples every year get together. We want to be the app of choice that helps couples stay together.
I'm sorry, this isn't
No, I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying we now have a game version of it, and I'm looking for anybody here that wants, and I own Coupleville, by the way, that would like to help us gamify it by helping couples stay together, helping marriages succeed. You really lower the crime rate.
You actually have a question? This is
Yeah,
not
the question is, is there anybody here that would like to help? It's a paid position to gamify it.
I need you to step away from the mic, sir. I need you to step away from the mic. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a visitor from the film conference across the way, and I know that Amy Pascal, the recently ousted head of Sony Pictures, just purchased, as of yet, unwritten book on the topic of this controversy within the gaming community. What advice would you give to the screenwriter, not me, I'm not important enough yet, who will undoubtedly be hired to write the movie of this story, on doing the research and creating the characters that will soon be portrayed on the big screen?
I would be very careful. I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I would be very careful in taking the words of the person she bought the story from as fact.
Would you participate in interviews with that screenwriter?
Okay. I mean, I'm not a film person, so but I'll talk to anybody if they want to talk to me. That's fine.
I mean, yeah, I'm not involved at all in really any of the controversy. I kind of have jumped in after the fact and talked about sort of the ethical standpoints from a journalism perspective. If they wanted to email me though, or call me, I'd be happy to talk to them. I think the first question I would have is it based on true, you know what I mean? How is it being branded, right? Is it being branded as a documentary? Is it being branded as based on true story, inspired by true events? Or is it just a feature film? If it's a feature film, I think while some people may be happy with how they're portrayed, unfortunately, the maker of the film can portray it however they'd like. I mean, that's kind of, from a very realistic perspective. If they wanted it to be true to form and sort of more true life, true to what happened, I would say come at the perspective of how a journalist would. I mean, ask all the questions, interview people, do your own independent research.
Thank you so much.
It's an autobiography, I think, that they purchased to turn into the script, from what I recall.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People tend to present themselves in a better light than is realistic, whoever they are, if they're doing an autobiography.
Will you be writing a book?
No.
I'm too lazy to write.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And who do we have next?
Hi, I have a question for, I guess for Nick. It's sort of a follow-up to the question earlier, what do we do to fix games journalism? And your answer more along the lines of it's kind of already fixing itself, where gamers are going from the big news sites that are spinning a story to people that are maybe more accurate. And the follow-up I have to that is, while that really works well for people who are gamers, there's clearly an audience out there that wants to hear the story that, gamers are bad people, that they're murderers and rapists, so that they're gonna go to these other sites that'll feed them that story. And my worry is, we've seen, Anita Sarkeesian type or Jack Thompson type, whoever it may be that wants to hear that story. What do we do when that happens again and there's a big group of people that are like, yeah, get rid of all the gamers or something,
Do what we've always done. Just push back. I mean, this is nothing new. This stuff is going on when our grandparents were our age, right? I mean, it's comic books are gonna turn our boys into homosexuals. Rock music is gonna destroy the planet. Dungeons and Dragons is gonna turn people into Satan worshipers. And then to the Jack Thompson. And people forget that the Jack Thompson thing wasn't just violence, right? It wasn't just Killer Instinct is bad. They went into all the same sexism stuff that we're dealing with now. This is just a cycle that'll keep happening, and it's very Western specific too. This isn't a worldwide thing. This is, the U.S. and some of the U.K. and Australia is really, really bad with it. He's got to keep pushing back. It's never going to go away.
Okay.
That probably sounds defeatist, but
I just wondered if there's anything, that audience is always going to be there, but is there a way to prevent journalists from feeding them this story that is probably not really accurate whenever you've got clearly another section, good games journalists that are giving a more accurate story? How do you've got two sides here, how do you kind of keep them
People will always hate what they don't understand. It's like I said, it's no different than anything else. It's not specific to games, although because the games are such a big industry, there's a lot of money to be made off of making people hate games. Like you're saying, it gets a lot of eyeballs. But yeah, that's it. I mean, it's going to keep happening. It's never going to go away. The only thing you can do is push back, and it'll go on for 5 years, and then it'll vanish for 5 years, and then it'll pop back up again. It's just the way it is.
And to extend on that, I think that there's a major difference this time. Last time you had Jack Thompson coming at us with the hatchet. This time we've got, I hate to name drop, but Anita Sarkeesian coming at us.
Well, not anymore.
Oh yeah,
she gave up. She's trying to steal money from other people now.
Right. But the difference this time is that we don't have the video game journalists going to bat for us anymore.
We didn't before either, though. No. People forget that too. When a lot of the younger people on Twitter saw New York Times writing articles about this stuff, right? Not the print edition, just the online edition, obviously, because that way they can more easily change the facts after the fact. But they did the exact same thing when the Jack Thompson stuff was going on, and I don't think people remember that. Whether it's print or online, they still want eyeballs and they still want page views. And maybe that would be in the opinion section back then, and now it's hard to tell what's opinion and what's news, especially on their website, which is just not a good website. It's going to keep happening. It'll never change.
Next in line.
So I think it's clear now that there are journalists and developers that are basically using games journalism and games themselves as a platform for their various political positions. So I was wondering, should we consider this as a form of free speech and just let them do that, even while it's harmful to the community? Or should we just sort of do something to sort of unpoliticize the platform so that it's, back to being a form of entertainment instead of a medium to get out a message?
That sounds like a journalism question.
It does? I thought it sounded like a gaming question. So you mentioned free speech. Okay, so are you saying, I guess I don't understand really the question. I don't know, maybe
is the question that should they be allowed to write these biased pieces that are not so quite connected to reality because of free speech?
Yeah, basically.
Well, there's also libel and that kind of law stuff, so it's not, people are allowed to lie, sure. But there is an impact when you're on a platform, right. a journalistic platform, or a platform that markets itself as journalistic. There is an impact there, and as part of the SPJ thing is you need to think about that before you publish it.
And that goes to, libel, defamation. These are things that journalists are aware of and have been in mainstream media. They know what these are. They understand the consequences, lawsuits, all of this that could come. I think what's happening is you're seeing people publishing online, and they may not be aware that if their story is impacting someone, one, if it's false, let's say they're publishing something that is just false. If it's impacting or naming someone and it's harming their reputation, just because it's not published, on CNN or, New York Times or whatever it might be, there still is culpability there, potential for lawsuits. I mean, that still is all there. And that's where I guess why I've kind of gotten involved in SPJ has, been a part of these conversations is we want people to know if you're publishing online and you have questions, ask us. We want to help. We're not just here for journalists working in the mainstream. I think, though, the other good point is with free speech, people can say what they want. If it's opinion-based, you have to be careful about that too, right? I mean, it only still goes so far. Even if something is not true and you say it as your opinion, your coverage is only still very, very small if you look at it legally. So those are all things, I guess, to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on developers politicizing their product, such as I think an example might be Sunset, where.
Well, it didn't help their sales.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's much benefit in doing that.
Okay. Well, I guess the sales kind of speaks for itself. But okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have kind of a two-part question. And the first part is, ever since October, everybody's favorite bully has been crying about being a victim and has been talking about their event that occurred this weekend. The
other panels, you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
And the entire time between October and this weekend, almost all the articles I've read refuse to acknowledge her victims or even the existence of this panel. How much of a breach do you think that is to refuse to even admit those people exist?
In ethical terms?
Correct.
It's pretty bad. I mean, it's not cool. But it's also no surprise. No one reaches out to us to talk about stuff because giving someone reasonable answers doesn't generate clicks.
Well, I will say, I hope that changes. And look, I don't report on the gaming community. I don't. If I did, I would want to reach out to all those involved. I would want to do some research. If there are victims of some of these other people who you say are victims, I'd want to do that research. I'd want to look into it, and I'd want to ask those questions. If it's not being done, that's disappointing, and it should be being done.
And to go a little further here, throughout all this, I've been contacted a lot, actually, quite frequently. Oftentimes, I end up as like a footnote in the article, but I am essentially serving my purpose. I started the Open Gaming Society to sort of be that figurehead for the gaming community, to sort of represent kind of collectively what we as gamers feel and think, and how we judge certain situations. So, I mean, effectively since October, I've been serving my purpose. We've been serving our purpose as an organization. So it's getting better, certainly.
And the second part is, that same person at one point mentioned that they were losing control of the articles being published. How should such a comment be treated by professionals? That somebody in that position can just come out in the open and say that they're angry about losing control of the situation that was either the journalist control at the time or the sponsors of South by responsibility to handle.
I'm trying to understand. So your question is, I think I know what you're talking about. They were unhappy with the type of coverage they were receiving, and they felt they were losing control of the content of the articles. They should never have had control of the content of the articles to begin with.
Yeah,
It's the journalists that control the content of the articles, not the people that they're written about.
Yeah, and I will say, unfortunately, I've done stories, people sometimes are not happy with the coverage. for a variety of reasons. They may think it makes them look bad. Well, if they did something wrong, that may be why it makes them look bad. But so that's why, we look at things and we get complaints and we talk to people, we hear them out, but as long as it's true and it's factual and everything that we reported and worked on is true, we reached out to them for comment, they decide they don't want to talk, our article stands. They can be unhappy and they can yell at us. I've been yelled at on the phone. I've received nasty emails. I've received nasty letters. But at the end of the day, if what we're writing is true, if it's accurate, if it's fair, we're going to stand by it. We may talk to them again. They may decide now we want to talk to you. We may do a follow-up. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have that. That's just the reality, right? It's not, you can't make everyone happy with your article, and you shouldn't try to make everyone happy with your article.
Well, it's more of an issue that this person had relationships with people inside both South by and some of the publications that were writing the articles. That's where the control issue seems to stem from.
And that's where that kind of relationship should be, it should be transparent about it, and it should be made public that if they're writing about it. If the reporter had a relationship with the person they were interviewing, that should be made public, and they should be transparent about that.
And I just want to say, I'm going to have to ask you to move on. We've been given a 5-minute warning, so we've got to get to the other questions. I do apologize. Thank you.
I just want to go back to earlier we were talking about bias in reviews and in coverage of products like that. And the example, and you mentioned that a reviewer should set their biases aside and just review the product in hand. But the example given was feminist frequency, which I think wears its bias on its sleeve. And I guess my question is there room for openly ideological outlets to put it in their review? And not necessarily that they are entitled to an audience, but are they at least entitled to voice their opinions?
Oh, sure. There's always room for critique. But I mean, that's not news. That's not journalism. That's opinionating. That's criticism.
Game reviews
are
criticism and opinion for the most part anyway. Game reviews are. So I feel like as long as reviewers are putting out their biases and saying I'm biased by this, rather than saying I have no biases, because there's no human being that has no biases.
I think that the actual problem that most people had with feminist frequency is not necessarily that they were looking at things through a feminist lens, which I think was a great idea, and I had high expectations for it. I didn't commit any money to her Kickstarter, thankfully, but I had high hopes for it. But the big problem was that a lot of it wasn't necessarily factual, and a lot of it seemed very inflated, and there was some suspicion of maybe even stolen footage and all sorts of things. So there was a lot to it that made people dislike feminist frequency.
Yeah. That stuff didn't even bother me, because that's more or less what I expected. But if you're a critic who can't take criticism, you're a poor critic.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Lee, I'm from BBC News. I think I may be representing the mainstream media slightly. I have a point and then a question, if I can do it quickly. My first point is we're often accused of not going to Gamergate, to whatever Gamergate is, and getting a response. And I think what I'd say is it's extremely difficult to do that, because often we don't know who exactly we should be talking to. One half of people will say, you've got to talk to this person, and when we do talk to that person, the other half says, you're idiots talking to that person. We get criticised for cutting interviews down from 20 minutes to 5 minutes because they're on the radio. We had complaints for cutting someone off because we went live to Barack Obama speaking once. And so I think I'd like to request, and I've made this point to the other side, if we want to put it like that, for just a touch of civility when it comes to talking to journalists, because we are genuinely trying, and there's not this sense, and I've had this told about me specifically in our team, that somehow all the media has gathered up in a room and said, right, guess what, everyone, we're going to have a go at Gamergate. That's not the case. All we always ever want is an interesting story. You may define it as clickbait, we may define it as bias. I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's a determination to get an interesting story. My question is, I think there's an overinflated sense of conspiracy theories around how the media works, around the idea that somehow, like I say, we've all got together and decided that we're going to hate people. And it's absolutely not true. And I want to ask Lynn whether she recognises some of that, and whether that's actually counterproductive to the people that are calling out this so-called conspiracy.
I mean, yes, I guess more so since kind of talking to some people involved in Gamergate, both sides, I have seen that. I do think it's true in many cases, right? I mean, it's political season right now, election season. Everyone's like, oh, so liberal, the media is so liberal, or, they like a certain individual. You get that all the time. So I totally agree that it's there. It is unfortunate because I do agree with you. A good journalist, a genuine journalist, is not trying to make a story that's going to be untrue. They want an interesting story. They're trying to be fair. They're trying to be ethical. Now, unfortunately, sometimes, even when we try our best, we get it wrong. We try not to, though. But if we do, I think the civility thing that you mentioned is so true. Tell us respectfully, get on the phone, engage us in a way that we can then do something about it to fix the situation, do a follow-up, make the situation right.
And if I may, I wanted to talk to his point, and this will have to be the last thing said today. He's giving me the death stare back there. You mentioned that when you try to reach out to the Gamergate or even just the gaming community, you're not sure who to talk to. That's part of why I formed my organization. Was I realized that was a problem. When people want to reach out to the gaming community, well, you reach your hand in a big beehive, and you're going to get stung by a couple. So we wanted to be kind of that front-facing organization, and you come to us and you say, okay, hey, we want to know what's going on with Gamergate. You let us talk to them. You let us go back and hunt down the figureheads within that community, and then we'll come back to you.
I guess just any removal of noise for a journalist is great, because I have an hour to write a story sometimes, and I'm told that I didn't spend 5 hours trolling through Reddit to find stuff. And it's just not possible. And we'd like help, and we're trying our best to do it, but I think some of the tone towards the media, as if it's some kind of mafia against you, I think is unfair, and actually it makes the problem worse, I think, because if I write about harassment and loads of people come along and say, you're an idiot, I think, you know what, I think they might have been right about harassment, because it's happening right now. So meet us halfway is what
you're
I'm
dealing
saying.
with the gaming community. These are not media savvy people. They're not PR folks. They're not marketing folks. And if an organization like BBC does write an article that seems a little slanted to those people, they're probably going to call you an idiot, whether you're an idiot or not. And that, that doesn't make it okay.
Why can't people tell me
they
disagree? That's what I'm saying.
What's that?
Why can't those people tell me they disagree, as opposed to calling me an idiot?
That's not how gamers talk.
Well, okay,
you got to realize,
isn't it?
You got to realize we're the ones that get into a game of League of Legends, and as soon as someone dies in 5 minutes, we're like, feeder noob.
But that's a good point. And I think at the end of the day, if there was more civility, just in general online, and this is not just Gamergate, this is just in general online, I think a lot more could get done it would make everyone's jobs easier. Journalists, marketers, people, the public. I mean, it would just eliminate a lot of things.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, unfortunately, everyone, I know we had a couple more questions there in line, but we are out of time. We've been given the death stare long enough. I wanted to thank everyone for coming. We definitely got a larger turnout than other events. We've had overwhelming support both on Twitter and now here in person. We want to thank all of you. It's been great to organize this, and we've had a lot of fun since October, and it's there's been plenty of headache, but we've had a good time, and I wanted to thank both Lynn and Nick for being here. They spent a lot, and I also wanted to thank HoneyBadgerRadio for coming here to record the event for us. They expended quite a bit, and all they asked for were a couple interviews. So thank you, all of you. You've been incredible, and this has been an absolute blast. Thank you, and this was SavePoint.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.